Hello everyone! Welcome to another multiplayer match. This is going to be a 3v3 that I played because I wanted to test out the connections on 3v3s. Because the 2v2s sometimes get a little slow, and so I want to see how the 3v3s are, in case you're wondering about playing one or even a 4v4. And let me tell you, the 3v3s that I've tried out have been pretty bad in terms of connection. That's not going to show up in the replay, luckily, but in the live play, pretty bad, so just know that going in, and you may have a slow experience. So anyway, I took Bretonnia because I really like Bretonnia. They are the least fleshed out faction, but I love them. I have a core of men-at-arms, specifically because we were fighting against Chaos, Orcs, and the Vampire Counts, all of which can bring monstrous creatures, all of which can bring Cav, and, of course, Chaos is mostly going to probably be armored. Not many people I've seen take their Marauders. They usually take the heaviest armored soldiers, which this Chaos player did. So, Men-at-Arms is a very solid choice, because they are anti-large, they are anti-armor, and they have charged defense against all, which means if they are sitting still and embrace, they will negate charge damage given to them by other units. And what's really cool in multiplayer is that I sometimes forget to issue charge orders because I'm all over the place in multiplayer. You can't pause it. So I really like these Bretonnian charge defense against all traits that the Men-at-Arms have and also that their Spearmen have. Now, I didn't take any Spearmen because specifically we are fighting against Vampire Counts, Orcs, and Chaos, which are not necessarily known for their ranged components. So there's really no need to have a shield for kind of like a screening. So that's my core. I also have the King on top of his Hippogriff Beatrix? The King is amazing. The King gives a aura of 12% damage reduction, physical damage reduction. The Damsel down here gives a magic resistance aura to everybody around her. But the King also, what's really cool, is that if the King is, if their leadership is not high, then map-wide, all of the King's soldiers will receive a attack buff, charge defense, or charge offense buff, and then they will become immune to psychology. Psychological, terror and fear. They become immune to terror and fear if the King breaks, which I think is pretty sweet because terror and fear is a nice way to knock out a Bretonnian army, but if the King flies away because leadership is low, they're going to be like, we're going to fight because they broke our king, and I just like the feeling of that. But yeah, I also like to always bring a Damsel. Her spells are pretty good. She has a couple buffs. She has a lot of direct damage, bombardment, breath spells, vortex spells. So she has a lot of different spells for different situations. So I always like bringing the Damsel and not the Paladin, because the Paladin doesn't really do too much. The Paladin is a good warrior and is also the only other hero for Bretonnia right now, but I much would rather prefer the Damsel and King. I always bring these two. Behind them we have 4 Peasant Bows, because I like to focus fire monstrous creatures down, which again, these 3 factions can bring monstrous creatures, so that's why I brought the Peasant's Bows, to just focus them down. And then I always usually bring Grail Knights. We have 3 here. Grail Knights do magic attacks. They are anti-infantry. They are shielded. They are armored. They have high leadership. They are immune to terror and fear. They're really good. Grail Knights are really good. Pegasus Knights are also really good, but I didn't bring any this time. My allies here, we have the Dwarves with a bunch of Thunderers. They have a couple Iron Drakes. They have a couple Organ Guns. Very ranged focus. And then their backbone are these Iron Breakers, which are the elite Dwarf units that have 60 melee defense. They're insane. They can hold for a long time. And then the Empire player here brought just basic Spearmen, not even shielded. They brought a generic Lord. And then most of their damage is in these Outrider, Missile Cav, and then 4 Demigryph Knights. And that's what the Imperial player brought. They were playing against the Chaos, who brought Chaos Warriors. Chaos Warriors with great weapons, which are anti-armor. And then a couple of Hell Cannons, and I believe Archaon? I believe that's Archaon, sitting on a horse. Yeah. So there's Archaon and some Chaos spawn. The Orc player brought a core of Orc Biggins, which are okay. I don't know if I would make them a core, but they are okay. They also have a couple of troll units. They have Grimgore and an Orc Shaman. They have a couple black orcs in the back. And then we get into the person I'm going to be fighting here. We have, is that Manfred? I didn't even see in the battle, honestly. I think it's Manfred, right? Oh, and actually, no, it looks like it's just a generic vampire lord sitting on a, some kind of dragon. I haven't played the vampire accounts too much, so honestly, I don't really know what that thing's called. Other than, hey, there's a dragon. Then they have a core of spearmen, and then also Graveguard mixed into their lines. Graveguard, they're pretty strong. They're kind of scary. Behind them, we have some zombies in the forest, and then a Vargluf, which is a terror unit, monstrous creature, very scary if used properly. Then they have a lot of cav. They have 3 Black Knights with lances and barding, which are going to be anti-infantry. And then they have some Hex Wraiths as well. So those are the army comps. Let's press play. Now, seeing as my ally the dwarf right next to me had his organ guns right here, and also pointing towards the vampire lord, I decided to try and keep my army nearby, in support range of these organ guns. I really wanted to support them, again, because they are ranged focus, not many melee, so they can't really hold the line like I can. So I'm going to try and stay kind of close to the organ guns. The Empire player did a rush here, just rushing across the field, not caring, probably because the Chaos took Hell Cannons. And, again, all of their damage is basically in these Outriders and their Demigryph Knights. So this gets just crazy. There's just some stuff happening there later. As you can see, this player is sitting as Vargolf and his leader a little bit ahead. He's going to send the Vargolf charging into my lines soon-ish. Right now, I'm just positioning myself, again, near the organ guns, which are firing, aiming for the Vampire Lord, I believe, because they are getting some hits on him. The Vampire Lord's like, nope, getting out of there. Also, I always like bringing the King just to have a flying unit of some kind. He's just super good. The King is just super solid. I would always pick the King. He's just really good. Alright, so they're getting their cav in position. I know that I'm going to have to use my Grail Knights against their Knights just to hold them back from our Peasant Bowmen. And here is a suicidal run from their Vargolf. I'm not sure what the player was thinking. Maybe they didn't know the range of my Peasant Bows. But you can see they try and get the Vargolf out of there very quickly. Right there, I try to cast a spell with my Damsel against the Hex Race because they're really weak to magic. Unfortunately, I missed because I had to guess where they were going to be, but the player stopped the horses. And that was very upsetting. But here we are, about to mobilize my Grail Knights to try and counter their 4 Knights. And, well, actually, and Spearmen. I'm going to kind of ignore my main line because they have charge defense against all, so I'm not too worried about it. And here we go with initial charge. Now look at these hex rates. Yeah, so the Grail Knights do magic attacks. They are super weak to magic attacks. Don't put hex rates against Grail Knights. Never ever do that. And I finished them off with a spell from our Damsel. Meanwhile, the Skeleton Spearmen and the Graveguard are charging my Men-at-Arms. The Men-at-Arms are going to do pretty good here, just to hold them off, hold the line. Organ Guns pulling back. I have King Luan Kur going after the Vampire right now. Damsel doing some more spells. And this is just going to be kind of like a long, drawn-out fight between our Grail Knights and the Black Knights. I'm going to try and support with spells and the King, who's in this one-on-one battle. I love the King. He's pretty good. Here comes the Vargolf again, and I needed to take him out really quick so that their terror and fear didn't affect our troops. Organ gun firing at him as well. Here we go, about to cast another spell against these Black Knights and Skeleton Spearmen to try and help out the Grail. A little lightning strike for you. Doesn't do too much, but that's something. And I'm getting a lot of good hits against the Vampire guys, so I kind of stopped paying attention to the King for a bit, because I assumed that, you know, he would win this fight, because he is currently winning. And my Men-at-Arms continuing to hold back Graveguard. The Men-at-Arms will not win this, but they will hold for a long time. Zombies trying to get to my Peasant Bow, so I actually had to interrupt them with the Damsel. She's not exactly a melee combatant, but there's just zombies, so they're not even going to get many hits on her anyway. I try and focus fire these zombies down very fast, while my Men-at-Arms continue to just hold a line against the Graveguard and the Skeleton Spearmen. The Organ Gun's still trying to support me. Meanwhile, the rest of the Dwarf forces are actually engaged against the Orc, and their Thunderers and Iron Breakers are currently just mostly in melee. Because he didn't have much melee to begin with, and the Orc had tons of melee, so he had to put his Thunderers into the fight. These satchel charges are thrown from the Iron Breakers. It's pretty cool they have a special melee weapon. Also, I forgot to tell you, they're led by a Dwarf Lord. Over here on the Empire side, man, there are units everywhere. Chaos is just going everywhere, trying to track down the Outriders and the Demigryph Knights that are doing hit-run attacks, and it's just chaotic. It's just chaotic. Then we got this concentration of Orc against Dwarf, and the Dwarf looks very heavily outnumbered, especially since they put the Orc guns in support of me. But now they are moving them into position to support their own army, which was probably a good idea. And at this point, the King is routing. At the very last moment, I noticed before he died that he was actually losing the fight against the Vampire Lord, and then I pulled him out, but then he routed. But remember, when he's routing, everybody of my troops is immune to the terror and fear, and they get an attack buff, so that's not the worst thing, and he will be back. The damsel is now in a fight with the zombies again to try and keep them away from our peasant bows. She doesn't really have much to worry about because zombies are really bad melee combatants. And I'm trying to have the peasant bows focus down the rest of the Black Knights to see they fall down here so I can free up my Grail Knights to support my men-at-arms line, which the ones fighting against the Grave Guards are kind of losing, but the ones fighting against the Skeleton Spearmen are winning, as to be expected. And the king kind of routes and comes back a couple times, but he will come back. Now these organ guns should be in position to, yep, there they go, to support the dwarf line. And there's some iron drakes doing some flamethrower shots. They're pretty cool. These iron breakers are just going to last, man. They are so good at lasting. They have a very high leadership, very high melee defense. They will hold a flank, they will hold a line, whatever you want them to hold, they're really good at doing that. Here we go, getting some charges on the remaining vampire count units. Not many left. This player has mostly been dead. I did snipe their lord with our peasant bows when he made my lord route. Speaking of, here's the king coming back. And the king, I forgot to mention this, also just regenerates HP at all times. The king is so cool. So cool. And so now I'm trying to get my men-at-arms and my Grail Knights in a position to support the dwarf player who is kind of getting overrun. We also have some Chaos and Orcs nearby, so I wanted to make sure that these Organ Guns were going to be protected. So I'm trying to get my Grail Knights in position for that. And again, the Empire and the Chaos player up here. The Empire player is just kiting the Chaos player around with their Demigryph Knights and the Outriders. Doing a pretty good job. So these Black Orcs actually break before I get the charge off. So then I'm going to continue that into these Chaos Warriors that clearly want to stop these Organ Guns from firing. Backed up on my Peasant Bows. We get a nice charge here. But these Chaos Warriors with great weapons, they are anti-armor, and not exactly a fight that you want to keep the Grail Knights in. So I'm going to try and cycle charge and get them pulled out of there. The Chaos Warrior is very heavily armored, very strong unit. So here comes another charge. We got a damsel nearby. At this point, I don't really have too much Winds of Magic, but I believe I do cast another spell soon-ish. Dwarf player, Iron Breakers are still holding on against all of these Orc Biggins, against Grimgor in there, and the Orc Shaman. Here comes more Orcs down the hill. We definitely need to help out our Dwarf ally. I'm trying to get my men-at-arms in that area. Moving up the damsel. Is this when I cast the spell? I think I cast some AoE spell right here on the Orc Biggins at some point. But meanwhile, the Organ Gun's still having a great shot on these Orc Warriors. Here we go. Not the best shot. It actually missed. I wanted to be very careful to not hit the dwarves, even though they have magic resistance. I don't want any friendly fire, you know. So my Grail Knights and the Organ Guns and the Peasant Bows finished breaking the Chaos Warriors there. Meanwhile, up here you can still see the Empire player is continuing to kite the slow Chaos Infantry around the map, doing a very good job at that. And then I forget what happened here, but I got my men-at-arms in a line, but I didn't engage all of them. They just kind of sit here for, you know, morale support. I do get one group in, but the others just kind of sit here. And I'm afraid at this point to send the king into this melee, but I will eventually send him after this Orc Shaman because the Shaman is not a great melee combatant. And here comes a charge of Grail Knights. Dwarves, not really many left, but man, did they hold on to the last. They held on to the last, and there goes a charge from the king. You can see he has some HP back at this point. It's a slow regen, but a regen nonetheless. And it's at this point that the rest of the enemy units break for good. So Bretonnia, Dwarves, and the Empire win it. Again, it was chaos up here. I actually watched this battle again, just watching the Empire and the Chaos player, and man, the Chaos player just getting kited for days. I feel bad for that player. They had no chance against that Empire build. Let's show the final tally here. Alright, so we can see Scouter, the Dwarf player, not the biggest amount of kills on their Thunderers, which usually get a lot of kills because they were forced to go into melee. Not the strongest aspect, but they still got some. Organ Gun here, just killing it. 130 kills is great. Iron Breakers, I mean, this unit did really good. I'm not sure who this Ironbreaker was fighting against. Maybe Black Orcs or something, but still not bad at all. They also had an Engineer. I forgot to show you that. But the Engineer was supporting the Organ Gunners with its ability to decrease reload time. Let's see. Orc player. Did alright. I think the Black Orcs didn't really do as well as they were probably hoping. Grimgor getting 59 kills, because Grimgor's a beast, as always. And you look at me, Man-at-Arms getting some decent kills, but they were fighting against mostly Skeleton Spearmen, a couple Graveguard units. The King getting no kills because he went in a duel and lost almost his entire HP pool, but he did work nonetheless. Peasant Bows getting a lot of kills, and the Grail Knights, well, some of the Grail Knights getting some kills. Chaos player, I'm assuming the Chaos spawn and these kills here were against the Spearmen that the Empire player brought in, because those Spearmen were gone very quickly. So I'm imagining most of these kills were from the very cheap Spearmen. Let's see who got the kills here. I believe the Demigryph Knights did mostly well. Mostly. And the Outriders did okay. But look at these Spearmen. Nothing. To be expected. Spearmen are not that amazing. Witch Hunter, though, getting 46 kills. That's pretty good. And then the Vampire Count player, Graveguard doing very well against my Man-at-Arms. Spearmen, not so much. Zombies, bleh. And the Vampire Lord managed to get 18. Probably with the magic spells that they were casting. But you can see the Black Knights did not much. The Hex Knights and their suicidal charge against the magic attack Grail Knights managed to get 1 kill. And the Varghulf managed to get 2 before it was focus fire down. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that battle, everybody. I will see you all